Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray, and today I'm going to be talking about autogynephilia. Um, I thought it would be appropriate to be wearing makeup for this video topic. I didn't actually put this makeup on for the express purpose of this video, but I went to a Halloween concert last night and I dressed up as a e-girl, I didn't take my makeup off last night, so I kind of woke up with it still on. And given the topic of autogynephilia, I thought it would be fitting for me to do the video wearing the makeup because it's topically relevant. And I have alluded to this concept of autogynephilia in previous videos when I talked about why I transitioned, and other videos where I talk about cross-dressing, cross-gender fantasy, and the sort of paraphilic or fetishistic aspect associated with such cross-dressing, and how that tied into my gender issues, if you could call them that, and why I transitioned in the first place, and kind of my early childhood experiences of being fascinated with femininity and women's clothing, etc. So for those that don't know what autogynephilia is, it is essentially a theoretical construct developed by certain sexologists who study, sex. And it is a theoretical construct that was originally used as a explanation of why some trans women transition. Like, what is the causal origin of those desires to transition? And according to the theory, there are two reasons why trans women transition. I'm not going to go into the two reasons in great detail, but one of the reasons that was postulated in this theoretical construct was that, autogynephilia is one of the driving forces of why at least some trans women transition. And so if you're confused by the word, autogynephilia essentially means love of oneself as a woman. So the idea is that you are essentially turned on or aroused, or have some erotic pleasure from the thought of oneself as a woman. And I'm not going to go into super details about this, but that kind of thinking of oneself as a woman, that can be broken down in various ways. For some people, that thought of a woman includes, it's like you're desirous of, having the anatomy of a woman, or, being treated by a man sexually as if one was a woman. Or for others, it's about the clothing of women. For others, it's about being perceived as a woman, or it's about behaving as a woman, or in many cases it's a mixture combination of all these various aspects of thinking of oneself as a woman. And as the theory goes, that is tied into your sexuality in some way or another. And this was sort of originally conceived as a paraphilia, or a fetish. But the researchers behind this concept, they sort of elaborated later on, and they really reconceptualized it as more like a sexual orientation. And it's really like a variant of heterosexuality insofar as you are attracted to femininity usually, but that attraction to femininity gets turned inwards so that you're attracted to femininity in yourself. And, that attraction to femininity in yourself, gets manifested in various ways. For some, it's like I said, it's like, the thought of that anatomy or behavior or clothing or expression, etc. And the theory of autogynephilia is that for some people who have this condition, that sexual orientation or that arousal pattern is so intense that the only way to deal with it psychologically is to transition. And this is, so social transition or medical transition, surgery, hormones, etc. And, that was certainly true in my case. And where this theory gets really controversial is, sort of people saying, they like don't like the idea that this is like the explanation of why most trans women transition, because they think it's very reductionistic. They think it, sort of delegitimizes, the concept of transness in some way or another, or that, if autogynephilia was at the root of one's transition, then, somehow or another, that would sort of invalidate your identity as a woman, or something like that. And I really want to do my best to, steer clear of some of the more controversial aspects of this theory. And the like controversial aspect is saying that this is true of like most trans women or something like that. That's kind of the controversial thing, is when you say that like this theory or this construct or this phenomenon is what's driving trans women to transition. And I'm going to sort of not make that claim. What I'm going to do instead is say that the theory, as it's been articulated, is true of my own case. So I don't really want to make any blanket statements about, autogynephilia is like, it's like the leading causal factor in why trans women transition. I'm not going to make that statement. The statement I'm going to make is that the theory is true in regards to my own life and what drives, a lot of my behavior and my thinking processes and what drove me to transition. So that's all I want to say, is that it's true about my own life. And, that in itself is controversial, because people will say that like by giving validity to the theory, it's, transphobic or, invalidating of the reality of transness. But, or people think that like, well, if you have AGP, then, you no longer have a valid reason to transition. But Ray Blanchard, who, came up with this construct, he thought that it didn't really have any bearing on the question of whether transition is an appropriate clinical treatment for these feelings. He was just interested in like the causal origins of the phenomenon of being trans. So the fact that he thought that autogynephilia was the causal origin of one's transness he in no way thought that that sort of, you know, contraindicated the appropriateness of transition as a medical response to this, because, you know, for some people, these AGP feelings can be so debilitating insofar as they kind of take over your life. And, you know, if you just try and repress them, just bury them inside yourself, that like leads to psychological distress. And, you know, a way to sort of deal with the feelings is to transition. So, and that's certainly what I did in my own life. Like I had been dealing with these feelings for, you know, since a young boy. And it got to the point where, you know, it just became overwhelming in my life. And I didn't really know of any other way to deal with those feelings other than socially and medically transition. And, you know, 8 years later, after 8 years of transition, 8 years of hormones, I decided to detransition because I realized that, you know, I can deal with these feelings, you know, without taking on the trans identity. Like I can deal with these feelings by just, you know, being a regular guy, even though clearly I'm not a regular guy, because most regular guys, you know, don't have an interest in women's clothing and makeup and being feminine. But otherwise, I would say I'm a fairly, you know, masculine person. I'm, at least in terms of my interest and proclivities and mannerisms and, you know, what sort of hobbies and how I carry myself and my thinking process. Like I'd say I'm a pretty masculine person, but I like to, you know, dabble in femininity. And, you know, what I really wanted to talk about today was sort of a lot of, you know, misunderstandings about autogynephilia, because one of the most common, you know, criticisms is that it's degeneracy, it's perversion, it's, you know, it's like just this highly, you know, erotic thing, and it's like a kink, and you're sort of, you know, putting your kink on display. So some people are gonna watch this video and see me wearing the makeup, and I have like, you know, polish on my nails, etc., and they're gonna say like, you know, they'll say, oh, you're involving the public in your kink, or, you know, you're you know, performing like an act of degeneracy by, you know, bringing this kink into public awareness or whatever. You know, so it's like if you have this, some people will say the only, you know, ethical way or proper way to deal with this is to either, one, bury the feelings deep inside you and never, you know, give into them whatsoever, and just like spend your entire life repressing these feelings, or to never step outside your house or talk to anyone ever if you do happen to indulge in these feelings. But regardless, I want to clear up a kind of common misconception, which is that just because AGP has an erotic component, it doesn't mean that every instantiation of indulgence in AGP type behavior, it doesn't mean that that instantiation is, you know, sort of full on a sexual act of some sort. So for example, right now I'm wearing makeup, and arguably the ultimate explanation of why I'm wearing makeup today is because I have AGP. And AGP is, you know, defined as, you know, arousal at the thought of, engaging in feminine things or being a woman or whatever, but I'm not aroused right now. This is not in any way for me a sort of like way to indulge a kink publicly because I have some sort of like, fetish for public exhibitionism or something like that. Like, what I'm doing right now is, in terms of how it feels to me, it is a 100% non-sexual activity. It's just me wearing an aesthetic that happens to feel good, but not feel good in a sexual way, but just feel good in the sense that it's positively valenced. Like, if it felt bad, I wouldn't do it. If it felt just neutral, I probably wouldn't do it either, because why would I go out of my way to do something that's just neutral? So in some way, I enjoy this. Like, I like it. But do I 100% only like it in a sexual context? So do I 100% enjoy this only in a sexual way? No. And that's where a lot of the confusion is people don't realize that just because AGP has its causal origins in sexuality, that doesn't mean that every single expression of AGP is a sexual expression, because there's this metaphor with AGP where it's kind of like a marriage where at first, when you first meet someone, it's very hot and steamy all the time, and then as you sort of normalize that relationship and get used to them, it develops a level of comfort. So it turns from the erotic to romantic, and that's kind of the metaphor with AGP, where it kind of eventually becomes just an aspect of who you are. It's a way to be comfortable. It's a way to express yourself aesthetically. And in the cross-dressing community, there's often two sides of this. On the one hand, you have your sort of like people for whom it's purely sexual and it's just a kink, and they, when their AGP feelings arise, they, engage in an act of masturbation or something, and then when they orgasm, the feelings immediately vanish, and they put all their feminine stuff in the box and put it away, and they often feel deeply shameful about it and guilty, and then they go through these like cycles that correlate with their libido essentially. And for other cross-dressers though, that sort of erotic component sort of fades away, and it's just sort of a feminine side of oneself. It's not to say that there's never a sexual component. It's just that the sexual component is only one aspect of the overall phenomenon of why femininity is so appealing, because eventually it just becomes part of who you are in terms of how you express yourself and the sort of like aesthetic sensibilities that appeal to you. Like for me with women's clothing, I really like the texture. Like women's clothing is so much softer, and like I don't know if it's like a sensory thing, but it's more comfortable to me. Like when I touch it, it feels better. Like it's just the texture doesn't irritate my skin as much. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it's just there's something about the softness of the fabric that is like intrinsically more attractive to me. It just feels better on my skin. Not necessarily in a sexual way, but it just, because like even when I was a very young kid, I used to like hate having scratchy shirts that, you know, had the tag in the back that would scratch my neck or whatever. Like, it just really bothered me. I didn't like scratchy clothing, and I've never liked rough textures in my clothing. And I think, you know, looking back and trying to introspect on this, like that texture issue is probably one of the, you know, foundational elements of why this whole thing, you know, developed in the first place. So yeah, that is one of the main things I wanted to comment on was, you know, sort of how the expression of AGP is not like this, you know, degenerate act of perversion. Like, maybe it is for some people, but not always. Like, and that's the sort of thing where there's such a lack of nuance in this discourse, where people just want to paint these broad brushstrokes and generalize and think in very black and white terms. Like, oh, you're either this like crazy pervert or you're like a normal good person. And there's so much like shades of gray in between like those things, where, you know, people think that just because sexuality is at the root of something, that doesn't mean that it like explains the entire phenomenon. It doesn't explain every behavior, every thought, every feeling, every desire. Like, the causal origins of something are just that. They're the causal origins, but they don't explain the entirety of the phenomenon. So that was the main thing I wanted to communicate. And, you know, there's so much more to be said about this topic. It's obviously very, very, very controversial. You know, people will straight up get canceled for talking about this. You know, they'll say you're transphobic and all this stuff. And, you know, but again, I'm not necessarily getting into the politics of whether this theory is like true for all trans women or trans people. But it's true for me. Like, when I read about this theory, and, you know, and I particularly want to recommend Phil Illy's book, Autoheterosexuality. It's a very good book. Really like him and his work on this topic to sort of like destigmatize this, because I think it really just needs to be destigmatized, and that's why I'm talking about it. Like, so yeah, I just wanted to further contribute to the destigmatization of this topic, and that's sort of the whole purpose of this channel, is to sort of destigmatize femininity in males, to, you know, talk about, you know, detransition males, and, you know, how we can sort of, you know, for those of us detransitioners who are AGP, you know, how to sort of deal with these feelings in a way that's healthy. Yeah, so that's the video. Thanks for watching, yeah, I'll talk to you later.